You land at Narita with a functional understanding of Japanese, enough to order a beer, apologize for existing, and compliment someone's umbrella. Then, within 48 hours, you witness a salaryman bow so deeply to a vending machine that you question whether he's apologizing to it for a bad transaction. You see a woman weep at a cherry blossom petal falling, not because she's sad, but because the beauty is literally unbearable. You watch an entire office collectively sigh in relief when a meeting gets canceled, a feeling so specific it has no name in English. Yet in Japan, it's a shared national experience. The paradoxical truth is this: Japan has emotions that don't exist anywhere else. Not because the human brain is different in Tokyo, but because the cultural architecture is so uniquely demanding that it invented entirely new emotional states to cope with its own rules. We're not talking about vague moods. We're talking about precise, named, culturally codified feelings that have dictionaries entries, etiquette guides, and centuries of literature behind them. And the most bizarre part, some of these emotions are so painful, so exhausting, that they require their own social rituals to even express. So what exactly are these phantom feelings, and why did Japan need to invent them? The answer begins with an emotion that sounds like a greeting card, but functions more like a social guillotine. The first stop on this emotional tour de force is mono no aware, a term so untranslatable that scholars have spent decades failing to capture it. The closest English gets is the bittersweet pathos of things, which is both pretentious and vague. What it actually means is this: the acute, almost painful awareness that everything is temporary, and that this impermanence is what makes things beautiful. This isn't just a poetic concept, it's a survival mechanism. Japan experiences around 1,500 earthquakes a year, has lost entire cities to firebombing, and watches typhoons erase coastlines with religious regularity. When your entire physical reality is a house of cards, you develop a psychological relationship with loss that goes beyond sadness. Mono no aware is the ability to feel the transience of a cherry blossom in real time, not mourning its fall, but simultaneously embracing its beauty and its inevitable death in a single emotional pulse. The 11th century court lady Sei Shonagon wrote entire lists about this, ranking moments of exquisite sadness, like watching a loved one leave as the rain begins to fall. But here's the dark twist. Japan weaponized this emotion during the Edo period. Samurai were taught to meditate on mono no aware, to accept their own deaths without fear. It became a method of emotional compliance. If you could train a soldier to find beauty in his own annihilation, he wouldn't run from battle. So this gentle, melancholic appreciation for life's brevity was literally used to manufacture martyrdom. You feel the sadness, you accept it as beautiful, and then you charge into the guns. That's not poetry. That's social engineering through emotion. And it only gets more complex when you understand the next feeling, one that lives in the dark space between obligation and exhaustion. Now, imagine a feeling so specific it has an entire etiquette manual, a feeling you can detect in someone's posture from across a crowded room, a feeling so uncomfortable that getting the wrong gift can trigger it. This is giri. Most textbooks translate giri as duty or obligation, but that's like translating rage as being slightly annoyed. Giri is the unbearable weight of social debt. In Japan, favors aren't kind gestures. They are items in a ledger that must be repaid in exact emotional currency. If someone invites you to dinner, you owe them giri, a feeling of debt so heavy it hurts. If you fail to reciprocate appropriately, you don't just look rude, you actively damage the social fabric. The horror of giri lies in its complexity. The Japanese language has a word, kizukai, which means the ability to notice someone else's needs without them asking. If you have excellent kizukai, you detect the giri your colleague feels after you help them, and you deliberately accept a smaller debt repayment to relieve their burden. It's emotional chess. This system emerged directly from the feudal rice economy. In villages, everyone depended on everyone else to survive a bad harvest. If you helped a neighbor repair their roof, they owed you rice. But if you refused their repayment, you'd shame them violently because the unreciprocated debt would create permanent giri. To avoid this, communities developed elaborate rituals of giri repayment, specific gifts for specific occasions, wrapped in specific paper, presented with specific bows. One mistake, and you've created a social injury that lasts generations. Modern Japan modernized the economy, but never abolished giri. It's still there in the annual Ochugen gift-giving season, where families send expensive presents to anyone they owe a favor to. The Japanese Postal Service handles over 200 million gift packages during Ochugen. That's not generosity. That's an entire nation paying off emotional debt just to survive the year. Giri is the feeling of being trapped in a ledger you never asked to be entered into. And if that sounds draining, wait until you meet the emotion that is literally the fear of imposing on others. You've probably heard of amane, the famous Japanese concept of dependency. Western psychology often romanticizes it as the healthy interdependence that individualism lacks. That's a sanitized lie. Amane is the emotional equivalent of spontaneous human combustion. It happens when someone dares to rely on another person without pre-negotiated terms. The psychologist Takeo Doi, who popularized the term in the 1970s, described amane as a child's feeling of total trust in a mother, the belief that she will understand your needs without you expressing them. In Japan, this isn't reserved for children. Adults seek amane from bosses, lovers, and even coworkers. The problem is that amane is terrifying. To feel it, you must drop your entire social armor, stop performing the exhausting dance of giri, and just be vulnerable. That vulnerability is so risky that Japanese society invented a counter-emotion, enryo. Enryo is the powerful, almost physical restraint that stops you from expressing a need because you fear imposing on another person's omoiyari, their capacity for consideration. The classic example is the shared bottle of beer at a company drinking party. Someone pours for you, you must drink, but you must not appear too eager because that signals you're taking advantage of the pourer's omoiyari. The entire interaction is a choreographed ballet of amai denied and enryo performed, all while the beer gets warm. The raw data is staggering. Japan's suicide prevention hotlines report that the #1 reason people hesitate to call is enryo. They don't want to burden the operator. The fear of imposing on a paid professional whose job is to answer the phone prevents people from asking for help. That's how deep enryo cuts. It's not politeness, it's a neurotic lockdown on your own needs. And this leads directly to an emotion so dark it requires its own word, a word that describes the exact moment your soul leaves your body in a public space. Hazukashi is usually translated as embarrassing, but that's a linguistic drive-by. Hazukashi is the active, almost visceral feeling of being seen as you truly are, stripped of all social masks and judged unworthy. It's the dread that powers Japan's infamous perfectionism. In a culture where the group's harmony is paramount, the worst crime is sticking out, and hazukashi is the emotional penalty for doing so. The anthropologist Ruth Benedict wrote about this in The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, noting that Japanese shame culture is external. You don't feel guilty because you broke a moral rule. You feel hazukashi because you were caught failing a social expectation. The two are worlds apart. Guilt can be absolved. Hazukashi cannot. There's no confession booth for social failure, only the burning memory of the mistake replayed in your mind at 3 a.m. for the next 15 years. This is why Japan has an entire industry dedicated to hazukashi avoidance. The hanshi used in calligraphy, the exact angle of bowing, the correct phrasing for declining a third cup of tea, these aren't traditions. They are armor against hazukashi. One wrong move and you're exposed. The economist Masahiro Yamada coined the term parasite singles to describe young adults who live with their parents well into their 30s. But the deeper driver isn't laziness, it's hazukashi avoidance. Living alone means managing your own social life, dating, and professional connections. Screwing up any of those triggers? Hazukashi. Staying at home, wrapped in your parents' approval, is a safe fortress against the public eye. Japan's low birth rate isn't just economic, it's a demographic crisis born from a civilization-wide allergy to the shame of social failure. And this brings us to the climax, the emotion that doesn't just describe a feeling, but actually enforces social order. An emotion so powerful it can bankrupt a business, destroy a reputation, and erase a person from society in a single evening. This is kyofu, not the Japanese word for fear. That's osore. Kyofu is terror, specifically the fear of social rejection so intense it triggers physical paralysis. And Japan institutionalized it. The most famous manifestation is Taijin Kyofusho, a clinical diagnosis recognized in Japan but rarely in the West. It's the pathological fear that your body odor, your facial expressions, or even your gaze will offend others. Sufferers literally avoid eye contact because they believe their stare is too intense, too aggressive, that it's hurting the person they're looking at. This isn't shyness. It's a psychiatric condition rooted in the cultural imperative to not disrupt the wa, the group harmony. In the 1990s, Japanese schools reported a spike in kyofu-related absenteeism. Students were staying home because they were terrified of breathing too loudly in class. The Japanese government responded by funding relaxation rooms in schools, spaces designed to reduce kyofu triggers. But the irony is tragic. The relaxation rooms themselves became sources of kyofu. Students were afraid to use them because entering the room was an admission that they couldn't handle the social pressure, which made them even more of a burden. The cycle was inescapable. The ultimate expression of kyofu is the kodokushi, the lonely death. Over 30,000 Japanese people die alone every year, and their bodies are often not discovered for weeks or months. This isn't just an aging population issue. It's an emotional ecosystem where the fear of imposing on others, enryo, combines with the terror of social judgment, kyofu, to produce a complete withdrawal from society. These individuals don't just die alone, they choose to die alone, because asking for help triggers unbearable emotional pain. So here's the profound, ironic observation you've been waiting for. The emotions that exist only in Japan are not mysterious gifts of a unique cultural soul. They are the psychological scars of a society that perfected collectivism to the point of cruelty. Mono no Aware was a survival tool for a land of earthquakes. Giri was an economic ledger for a feudal village. Enyo and kyofu are the walls built around a psyche that learned that belonging is only achieved through total, exhausting self-surveillance. Japan didn't invent new emotions. Japan invented a social machine so demanding that the human mind had to short-circuit into new forms of pain to function inside it. The cherry blossom falls. You feel the beauty, but you also feel the blade that pruned the tree. That's not a unique emotion. That's a normal human response to a system that asks you to be grateful for the knife.